So the next thing that we have to talk about is reduced traction situations. One of the most kind of common reduced traction situations that we will deal with in this area is a wet roadway. Okay, as the road begins, as it begins to rain, the first 15 minutes or so after it begins to rain, the roads are actually the slipperiest that they will be. That's because on the road you got little particles of dust and oil and rubber that are coating the roadway. And as that rain hits, those particles begin to kind of barely float off and they create this film on the road. And so as your car is driving, you've got that film actually kind of separating yourself between you and the road, the water itself rushing that off. And so until that has kind of washed off, the road can become very, very slippery. How do you kind of deal with reduced traction roadways? How do you deal with wet roads? Probably shouldn't even have to say this at this point in time, right? You slow down. Okay, you increase your following distance. Those are two of the best things you can do. I know I've said that a million times, and I'm going to say it a million more, I'm sure. Okay, one of these situations that happens on a wet roadway is actually called hydroplaning. Okay, hydroplaning is actually when your vehicle kind of loses traction with the road below it. Okay, it is caused by the water on the road causing your tires to actually float up and there's no traction. The only thing that makes your car work, okay, that makes these tires propel your car forward is friction. Okay, the friction and the traction that they create between the roadway. And so if they are not in contact with the road, if that water causes them to float just slightly, you no longer have that friction, you no longer have that traction, and you have no control over your car at that point in time. Okay, so how do you deal with that? Or one, make sure your tires are in good condition. Okay, deep new treaded tires are going to last. They're going to reach down to the road much better. But even with good tires, even in great condition, or good tires in great condition, even going slower, even going 35 miles an hour, if you hit some of these wet road situations, you can begin to hydroplane. You've probably felt it. Maybe you've been driving down the road with your parents or a friend, and you've seen a puddle on the side of the road, and when they hit it, you kind of feel that car. It kind of gives you that feeling a little bit of like being on a roller coaster about to drop. Like you're like, ooh, what was that? That was weird. Okay, that is the car actually losing some of that traction, and typically they happen very quickly and you get kind of back to it, but they can end up being very, very dangerous situations. If you have bald tires, okay, you can have these hydroplaning situations that even lower. These bald tires don't have the grip, they don't have the traction, and so when you hit those wet situations, it's going to rise up. It doesn't have the tread to kind of channel the water away. Okay, so reduce your speed, keep your tires inflated. As you run into deep water situations, one of the biggest pieces of advice is that if you see water running or flowing over a road, do not cross it. Okay, because you don't know, you might be able to see the pavement, you might still be able to see the lines, but you don't know what is happening underneath that road. It is possible that that flowing water has underwashed the roadway, and so when you drive over it, you'll hit that spot that has no ground beneath the pavement, and then you drop down. Okay, it also doesn't take much for water to cause your car to float. Just a little bit is enough. And so if that happens and your car begins to float away, flowing water is something you should never, ever, ever drive through. But there are some situations where you might have some standing water and you want to drive through it. We see this. I mean, I live in Scottsdale. There's a couple of places in our neighborhood where it rains and the roads flood, right? And it's not flowing water. You got houses and ditches on either side, but it just covers up the road. Okay? You can still drive through those situations, but you've got to be careful of a couple of things. You got to know how deep the water is, right? You do not want to get the water up to where it is over the bottom of your vehicle. Okay, so look at signs, look at trees, look at other vehicles as they drive through and determine whether you can make it through safely. If the water's at the rims of your tires, drive through it in a lower gear, drive extremely slow. try to stay off the shoulder, because if it's wet, that shoulder is going to be soft and you might sink in or dry. Once you have driven through water, okay, what you want to do is to apply light pressure to your brake, because your brake pads will get wet. I mean, obviously driving through a wet situation, there's going to get water on your brake pads, and you don't want that to cause you some sort of issue if you have to stop suddenly. So once you're out of the wet situation, apply a little bit of pressure to your brake as you're driving, and that's going to create some friction, some heat that will help to dry those brake pads up. Okay. As you do that, okay, once you have it driven, if you notice your car pulling to one side as you apply the brake, that means that it doesn't have the friction that it needs to, and so you need to dry those brakes off a little bit more. Again, apply a little bit of light pressure to the brake and allow it to heat up a little bit. So driving in reduced traction situations, snow, if it's freshly fallen snow, it's actually not that bad, okay? What we run into around here is that snow, it's usually kind of warm, and so as we hit this situation, you know, the snow that hits the ground is kind of mushy, it's wet. Depending on where it's at around freezing, you might see that, you know, that snow hits, it melts, and then it turns to ice. Those are situations where you've got to be careful of, right? In sub-zero weather, the exhaust of your car can actually kind of, the moisture in it can freeze on the snow, creating a sheet of ice. You know, the ice, the melted, can actually turn into ice as well. And then at intersections where a lot of traffic is, it packs that snow down. And so you just have to be careful as you drive through snow situations. I know I don't have to say this, but as you're driving through snow situations, drive slowly and increase your following distance. Okay? Don't make sudden movements. Accelerate, steer, brake smoothly and gently. You don't need to make jerky motions. You don't need to floor it or slam on your brakes. Do everything gentle in snow situations, and you're going to help yourself be successful in those. If you get stuck, okay, and by stuck, I mean, you know, like sometimes it's going to be in muddy situations or sandy situations. It might be in a snow situation where you've parked your car and it snowed, and the snow has kind of built up around your tires, and so you're not able to drive out. One of the techniques that we talk about to use is actually called rocking the vehicle. This is moving your car forward and backwards just slightly. Okay, you put it in drive, you drive forward, drive back. You don't want to spin your wheels, but what this is trying to do is to pack down whatever is in front of you, whether it's sand, mud, snow, so that your car, you then kind of create a track for your car to pull itself up out of. All right. Ice is an extremely dangerous situation, and please do everything you can to not drive in icy situations. I can't show you how many pictures, videos of ice situations where cars, they get going, they're driving, they hit a sheet of ice, and they just skid. And it's one of those things you can sit there and you can watch collision after collision after collision. Like, you can see that the car in front of you has lost traction. You can see that the car in front of you is skidding and is running into the car in front of them. And there's really nothing that you can do. Okay? So how can you, one, check your traction, squeeze your brakes a little bit, make sure that you have control. Once you lose traction, you're going to be you're not going to have it. And so make sure that you try to avoid losing any traction that you have. You're driving extremely slowly. You're applying light pressure to your brakes. Okay, you're not making any sudden movements. All right. Make sure that you understand that bridges can ice up before the road. That's because there's cold air on either side of the bridge that can kind of super chill that bridge. Okay, we call black ice. That's where you get a thin sheet of ice on the road. You can't see it. It looks like pavement, but it's extremely dangerous. Okay. Other situations where you can reduce traction: gravel roads, leaves, and construction areas where trucks might be pulling out of the road. They're leaving something behind. It might be logging areas where logging trucks are pulling out and they're leaving pieces of bark or or the gravel from the road they're pulling off of on the main road. It could be the person mowing their grass down the street. Okay. Side note, when you mow your grass, please, please, please do not blow your clippings onto the road. That is very dangerous. Cars tend to deal with that okay, but motorcycles can lose their traction just on grass clippings in the road. Okay. Back to what we're talking about though, leaves, gravel, all of those can create things under your tires that can cause you to skid, can cause you to lose traction. Okay. If you skid, okay, there's a couple of things that you need to do. First of all, the sooner you recognize your skid, the better. Okay. That gives you time to kind of respond. And then you need to make concerted efforts to get where you want to go. Okay. It doesn't matter what you're in. If you lock your tires up, okay, you have no traction. You have no control. Okay. And so as you're going through this, you've got to kind of fight steadily. I'm going to put some videos up that show how to get out of skids. But basically what you want to do is you want to drive the direction that you want to go. And so if you are in a skid and you're going this way, you're going to want to turn your wheel, and that way your tires catch and pulls you back. And then you're going to have to oversteer, right? You're going to have to steer, counter steer back until you kind of get your car a little bit straighter. There's a couple of different situations. There's overpower skid. This is where you apply too much power. This is where your wheels spin, right? Those aren't necessarily too dangerous. Just let off the accelerator. Over braking, this is where you hit the brake so hard your car skids forward. One way to avoid that is actually to kind of press your brakes slightly. We have what we call anti-lock braking systems on most of our modern vehicles, and this does that for you. So it's not going to let your tires skip up. If you press your brake hard, you might feel your car vibrate. That is your anti-lock braking system coming in. Your front wheel skid, release the accelerator. Try to slow your vehicle, okay, and steer towards the path that you want to travel. Kind of the same thing with a rear wheel skid. Release your accelerator, brake, get into neutral, and then steer in the direction you want your vehicle to go. If you're in a curve, that's obviously a little bit different situation. If you're skidding in a curve, you're probably going to end off the road, okay? But try as hard as you can. Again, don't give up. Try to avoid it. When you brake, like I said earlier, you can apply your brake so hard that you can cause your wheels to skid. Most modern vehicles have an anti-lock braking system that does that automatically. If you don't have an anti-lock braking system, what you can do is, press your brake pedal down and just kind of ease up on it, okay? Until you're pressing it hard, okay? And then once if you feel like those wheels are about to skid, you let up a little bit and you press it back down. You let up a little bit, you press it back down. You're basically pumping your brakes, okay? Now this does not allow you to stop in a shorter distance. This is all to keep your car and your vehicle under control, because if you lose traction, you're not going to be able to stop yourself,